To start as close to the time as possible, so we're going to begin. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Ellie Portel. I am the Outreach and Partnership Coordinator at OHEL. It's so nice to see so many people joining us. Obviously, we can't see who you are, and it was very important for us to make sure that everyone here is anonymous so that people feel as comfortable as possible. But tonight, we are here to, first of all, celebrate a really amazing partnership that I'm so proud to have been a part of, which is OHEL's partnering with two amazing organizations that themselves have been doing a lot of work together, and that is Sister to Sister and Al Khanfei Nasharim. So I just want to share a little bit about what that means, that we're partnering with them. Sister to Sister and Al Khanfei Nasharim are both two amazing organizations with different types of services that they're providing to single mothers and their families. And us at OHEL, we have so many different services and so many clinicians that are experienced in this area that it made so much sense for us to connect to be able to provide some of the wonderful services that we have at OL to the clients at Sister to Sister and Al Khanfei Nasharim. Just to throw out some of the services and just list some of them, we have full mental health clinics, both in Far Rockaway, that services the five towns, as well as in Brooklyn. We have group therapy that's taking place. We have psychiatry. We have executive functioning skills and coaching, and just so many different services that Baruch Hashem OL is able to offer, and we're so proud to be connected with Al Khanfei Nasharim and Sister to Sister to be able to work alongside with them to help everybody that needs help in the community. And we do have at OHEL, at our clinics, we have specifically trained therapists that are trained and supervised under Dr. Blumenthal specifically to deal with many of the complicated issues that come up with dealing with divorce, dealing with the challenges that come along with being a single mother and raising children in that space. And also, before I give it over to Chaya Wexler, who's the client service coordinator at Sister to Sister, I just want to kind of give a big thank you to Dr. Blumenthal for all of his incredible work in this space. And it's a real treat and pleasure for us to be able to hear so much of what he has to offer. He has so much experience. His reputation speaks for itself. I'm going to give it over to Chaya Wexler, but really just a big thank you to everyone at Sister to Sister, everyone at Al Khanfei, and to Dr. Blumenthal as well. Chaya, you want to take it from here?
Sure. Okay, so first of all, thank you, Mr. Patel, for establishing the partnership with Sister to Sister. We look forward to working together. For those of you who are Sister to Sister members and are interested in any of the services, please feel free to reach out to me. I will definitely make the connection in a seamless manner, and I'd be happy to, work through with you. In addition, if any of the five towns women are interested in an in-person, or it's open to anybody, but it is in the five towns, a five-town support group for single mothers facilitated by professionals. You could reach out to me as well. We are in the process of registration for the fourth cohort, Baruch Hashem, so please reach out to me as well. We look forward to partnering together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to give it over to Dr. Blumenthal. And Dr. Blumenthal, people can put questions in the chat. We are going to leave about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for questions as well to address. But if I see maybe something that comes in for clarification, I'll try to bring it up as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Let me also begin with some introductory remarks. First, I want to thank Ellie Portel. Ellie reminds me of the guy who the biographer said he's going to write his autobiography and include himself. Ellie has been a very big part of this initiative. And also want to thank Sister and Al Khanfei Nasharim. I can attest from my professional work what an indispensable role and function these organizations play and what a difference they've made for the people who would otherwise perhaps be floundering and lonely and confused and maybe even engaging in a lot of self-blame, that have this kind of fraternity and this kind of professional assistance. And I really urge everyone who's on to support these initiatives and to take advantage of them. I also very much am excited about this new partnership. I do want to mention that I also owe a debt of gratitude to OHEL that allows me to do this kind of work, and particularly our CEO, David Mendel, and our Presidium of Mel Zachter and Jay Kestenbaum, who make it possible for us to do this work. And one of the aspects of OHEL that I've always appreciated is that they're not very territorial. They very willingly share their work with other organizations and other initiatives without trying to necessarily take over or anything like that, but to really work in the spirit of partnership. So the topic I was asked to speak about, I'm not sure if I'll be, I'm not going to tell exactly the time. Ellie said there'll be 15 minutes for Q&A, which means that there's an expectation I'm going to speak for an hour and 5 minutes. I don't have enough jokes to carry that much time. So my guess is that I'll be speaking a little bit more, like a half hour, maybe 40 minutes, and there'll be more time for some conversation and give and take. But the topic that I was asked to speak about was from fall to spring, tools for single mothers to thrive through the winter. And the first question I had when the topic was sort of handed over to me was, well, why would it be any different fall through winter and spring through summer? Parenting is parenting, and the unique challenges of being a single parent or co-parenting with an ex-spouse, why would that be any different given what the temperature is outside or how long the day is? So it really, in a way, as very often these presentations do, forced me to think about it. And I really think there is a lot to be learned and considered during this, if you will, Takufa, this period which we're in, which is the fall and winter months. Fall and winter months are generally regarded to be much harder times. It's dark, it's cold. By now, the novelty of school has worn off. We're more indoor bound. We can't just venture out. And this is, so it's often considered a more challenging period. And this is probably less true today than it was, let's say, many years ago, because today, I'm sorry, I just did something wrong. Okay, there we go. It's less true today because we have a lot of comforts and a lot of ways to combat the cold and the dark that we didn't have in old times. If you think back to when we were more of an agrarian society, when there was a farmer, comes the cold winter months, there isn't much to do. It's hard to venture out. It's, as I said, it's cold, and it's you don't have much of you don't have automobiles or buses or trains like we had today. And you really hunker down in your house, maybe sometimes trying to be in close proximity to that one fireplace that you have. Today, we have centralized heating, we have electricity, we have, as I said, cars, we have means of transportation. So we aren't as confined during these winter months, but to some extent we are. In fact, I have a friend who lives in Montreal, and he told me that were it not for Shabbos, he wouldn't have to own a winter coat. Because he goes from his heated house into his heated garage, into his car that has a heating system. He drives to work. He goes into a heated garage. He goes up to his heated office. And even if he has to visit other people in downtown Montreal, they're all connected underground with, again, heat. So he really isn't exposed at all to the cold. So I don't know if that's true for all of us, but it's still a time where we are really more confined. And it's also, as I'm sure many of you know, that sometimes the lengthy periods of darkness can be associated with, if not depression, a very negative kind of mood, that there is something more cheerful about light. And therefore, it is, generally speaking, a harder time. It's also a time with fewer distractions. If you think about it, most of our holidays, maybe with the exception of Hanukkah, but most of our holidays are in spring, in the summer, or in the fall, not the summer so much, but in the spring and the fall. So there are more of those disruptions and and opportunities to get excited. But the winter months really don't have so many of these kind of holidays or commemorations. In fact, one of the things that was striking, of course, about 2 and change years ago, when the October 7th occurred, when the war broke out, I was asked by the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America, to speak with the rabbis in America. And one of the things I was told almost right away by the head of the RCA, who contacted me, was that for rabbis, the end of the holiday period is they're exhausted. They've just gone through a Chodesh Elul, a Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, a Sukkot, a Simchas Torah. Usually, when Simchas Torah is over, they can exhale, they can relax, they can get back into a more sort of normal routine. And of course, then suddenly the war broke out, which demanded so much of them. In fact, I remember once hearing a rabbi speak, and he mentioned that the Chodesh, the month which just ended, Cheshvan is often referred to as Mar Cheshvan. Mar sometimes means bitter. And it's considered bitter because it's really the only month in the Jewish calendar that has no holiday or no significant day in it. But he said, but it's not Mar Cheshvan for the rabbi. The rabbi looks forward to Cheshvan for the opportunity for a break. So the question then we can sort of ask is, well, why did Hashem create the world with changing seasons? What purpose was there? Hashem could have created the world that it's one season all year long. He could have created the world. He could have structured the celestial landscape in such a way that we have a consistent 12-hour days and 12-hour nights. What function was there? What purpose was there in creating a world that has changing seasons? In fact, they say, I've only visited the place twice, but they say that the city of San Diego has the most temperate temperature in the country, that it's all year, it's like spring. To me, that sounds kind of boring. That there's something interesting about the change in seasons. Well, I remember once I saw a cartoon which showed a couple walking on the streets of Manhattan, an older couple, and there's this hail and snow blowing into them. And the husband looks miserable, and the wife says, but I thought you liked New York because of the change of seasons. So what function does that serve? And maybe we can explore that a little bit from the prism of the unique challenges of the single parent, the single mother. So it's very interesting. They've actually done studies there's a lot of work in positive psychology, and studying happiness. And they studied it from a national perspective. They want to study what are the happiest countries in the world and what are the least happiest countries in the world. And this research did get a lot of publicity, so some of you may be familiar with it. But it's very interesting. Two things are very interesting. One is that the four so-called happiest countries, where the citizens are the most content and happy, the four happiest countries in the world are all in very northern climates, places in Scandinavia, where there is lengthy winters and many periods of time where there's a few hours only of sunlight. The four countries are Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. They are regarded as the happiest countries in the world. That's one thing that's interesting. The other thing that's interesting is that Israel is number 7. Israel, with all its hardships and with its constant pressure, terrorism, war. It was just, in fact, I don't know if you read it. There was an article I saw this morning, which I forgot now the number, but it stated how many terrorist attacks, most of which are, thank God, harmless, but how many terrorist attacks occur a day in Israel? And I think it's like something like 14 to 17 or something like that. And yet it's number 7, which is very high up there. America, in contrast, is number 24. So the researchers try to give a lot of reasons. Why are these 4 Scandinavian countries, these cold, dark countries, among the happiest in the world? So the most common reason they give is, has universal health care, strong unemployment, there's a lot of trust between people. I'm a little suspicious of those reasons. First of all, and again, I hope I won't get in trouble for saying this, but most research is conducted in university settings. All of us know the university settings tend to be like-minded in terms of liberal ideology and support of these kind of programs. So maybe they're putting a disproportionate amount of importance on that. I can't imagine that there aren't some countries near the equator that also have universal health care and strong unemployment, et cetera. But one of the things that they list, and I thought that was very interesting, and I think there's a lesson about that which we can all learn from, that they have very effectively adjusted to the harsh weather. They have very effective ways of insulation. protecting the warmth within the home. They use very special lighting that gives the indoors, at least, and even maybe parts of the outdoors, a more cheerful feel to it, and indoor designs that are very uplifting. So there may be a lesson in this, and maybe that also explains why Israel is so high up on the happiness list. But the point may be that we may think that happiness is something that comes to you in a silver platter. That happiness is, that you happen to live in San Diego and it's just such a wonderful climate, and therefore you're happy. But it would seem that this research shows that maybe happiness is an ability to take a harsh climate, a forbidding climate, a dark climate, and turn it around and make it more suitable to our needs. That there's something about overcoming that challenge that may lend itself to happiness. And as a psychologist, that makes a lot of sense to me, and may even explain not only why these Scandinavian countries have the highest levels of happiness, but also perhaps why Israel has such a high level of happiness. Again, when the researchers try to explain it, they talk about the diet, the Mediterranean diet. I can tell you personally, a Mediterranean diet wouldn't make me too happy, but also they say because there's a sense of purpose. There's a country that's being constantly challenged and constantly even assaulted, and yet to be able to manage that and rise above it creates a certain sense of purpose and happiness. And therefore, that's why Israel also is very high up in the happiness scale. But to take it back to our consideration of this time of year, I guess the message is that you can make an environment that could be very depressing, that could be make you feel downtrodden, and make it uplifting. And not only is that a challenge to overcome, but that could be the royal road to happiness, that an ability to take harsh circumstances and turn them around. It's very interesting in the work we do in bereavement, which is my department. The Hebrew word for comfort or consolation is nacham. But that word in Chumash, in Bible, has one and possibly two other meanings. Commonly, it's used in Chumash to mean to change your mind. Very early in Parshas Bereshis, it says that God that God regretted. He changed his mind. He changed his mind about creating man. We send a very famous line that we read on the fast days. God turned around his decision, changed his mind about doing harm to the Jews. There's a minority opinion that it also means revenge, as most famously we just read last week when Rivka sends Yaakov to her Lavan. She says that your brother is plotting to retaliate. So I believe it's Samson for Hirsch, if I recall correctly, asks, what do all three of these have in common? Consolation, changing your mind, and revenge. And he goes on to explain that they all suggest that a certain feeling going one way and you turn around and make it the other way. So in changing your mind, well, you were a Democrat, now you're a Republican. In revenge, you were a victim, now you're the aggressor. And consolation is taking something that's painful, something that was unexpected, something that hurts, and turn around and try to make something positive out of it. And that's perhaps the concept that we're addressing here. And maybe that's some of the overriding lessons that we can learn from these harder months, from these months when you have to bundle up to go out, when it's months when it's the snow's blowing in your face, and these months when it gets dark at 5 o'clock, that we can take that and turn it around and make it something useful. And other hardships as well, whether it's loss, whether it's divorce, whether it's the challenge of raising children, that we can take them and turn around and make them something positive. It's interesting. We ran a weekend, a retreat a few months ago for parents who lost children to suicide and accidental drug overdose. Those of you who may have been at the Ohel Gala last night, that work was featured at the gala. And it was mentioned there last night. I'm going to reference it again. At that retreat, the first activity we did was an art project called Kintsugi, which is a very interesting art job. What they basically do is they give you a piece of pottery, or in our case, it was a dish of some sort. You wrap it up in cloth. They give you a hammer or a mallet, whatever, and you break it. And then the work is to piece it back together in an artistic form. So it becomes a new type of plate or a piece of pottery from broken pieces, from previously an intact one, and broken pieces, and then put it back together. And that's maybe what we do with these more difficult months. And so I'd like to throw out a few ideas of what we can learn about these, as I said, on the surface, more challenging months, but ones in which can be maybe rewarding and helpful as well. So first of all, I think one lesson we can learn is the value of routine. Routine does not sound exciting. Family trips, adventures, something like that can sound much more exciting than just a day in and day out routine. But these are months of day out and day out routine. Again, we don't have as many distractions. We don't have as many opportunities, let's say, to travel and to go someplace, to go to a park or to go out. And as I said, there are only Hanukkah. There's Hanukkah in the middle, which is important. Somebody reminded me of that, and I didn't forget. But we don't have as many. We don't have a Pesach and a Shavuos and a Rosh Hashanah. Okay, we don't have as many distractions. And there is something incredibly healing. There is something very comforting about routine. There's a very famous Chazal. I saw it introduction to the Ein Yaakov. I'm not sure what the original source is, but it's a three-way argument, a machlokas. What's the most important pasuk in the Torah? And one person says it's Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Okay, that's Kabbalah's Al Malchus Shemayim. One says it's V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. That's the hallmark of interpersonal relationships. But one person says it's esakevas echad taseh v'botkev esakevas hashni taseh bein habayim. There is one of the sacrifices, the korbanot, is the tamid, which you bring a sheep in the morning, you bring a sheep in the afternoon. And he says that's the most important verse in the Torah, and that he's backed up and supported. Because it is a routine. It's that day in and day out routine that becomes very important. Getting up at a certain time, catching the bus, coming home, doing your homework, having some activity, a bedtime. These kind of routinized types of life, which is most characteristic of this time of year, is very comforting. And I would go so far as to say that even all the more comforting for those whose lives have been disrupted, that may have been disrupted by the dissolution of their parents' marriage. And to the extent that you can reinforce that and support that, that is comforting to children. In fact, even when children undergo other types of tragedies or other types of losses or something like that, part of what we encourage is a maintenance of the routine, even discipline. And sometimes children will even, when there has been a disruption, will challenge you, will purposely misbehave because I want to make sure you're in your game, that you're still acting as a parent. So this is a very good time to sort of not only provide this sense of predictability and routine, but also to come to appreciate it. Now, granted, if you're in the throes of a divorce, or if it's one of those divorces where the conflict lingers on, or where perhaps the ex-spouse continues to create disruptions in your life, there's not much that you can always do about that. But to the extent of what's under your control, it's really a very good time not only to provide our children the security that comes with predictability and routine, but even to come to appreciate it ourselves. There's a psychologist actually in the community, Janet Goldfein, and she writes about this publicly. So I'm not sharing something that's private. She's written about it, but she was actually raped in her office, and as a rape victim, as many times people do, she actually became then an expert in treating people who are rape victims. And in her writing, in her books, and she very often points out how healing the routine is. And she has lines like, and again, I don't remember them by heart, but probably should have taken it down because it just popped into my head now. But they said, stop at the red light, go at the green light, make the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, do the laundry. These are all sources of comfort, and this is a wonderful time to implement this. There's another very important lesson, and maybe to get back to that question is, why did Hashem create the world with a winter and then a spring and a summer? And perhaps it's in a very concrete way to remind us that darkness and harsh conditions are usually, for the most part, temporary. And we can come out, we can emerge from them. There is something like renewal. And again, if I say, I'm picking on San Diego a lot today, but if we lived in a climate that was spring all year, we may not appreciate that as much. There is something extremely exhilarating when the first flowers start budding and the weather starts getting warm. And we probably wouldn't appreciate that if we hadn't endured several months of freezing cold weather and darkness. And so there is a message for some of us who may be very sad and maybe very down about our life circumstances, and maybe some for whom a divorce has been fairly recent, and the world looks very bleak and dark, that there is a way out. And then again, it's Sister and Sister Al-Kanfei Nesharim really provide that support and that opportunity to be reminded of that. So it also is it's perhaps a time to experience the darkness, to experience the sadness of this period of time, and then to realize how it is temporary, and that is usually the case for many of the hardships that we go through. Another lesson that I thought we could extract from this is that we and our children don't have to be happy all the time. That perhaps Hashem created the world with this period, this dark period, with this cold period, to remind us that it's that being indulged and having your way, or having everything your way, is not necessarily, again, the royal road to happiness. And we live in an age of unprecedented indulgences and expectations of getting everything we want. And so then again, in a way that's not too overwhelming and not too destructive, Hashem shows us that there are periods of time when where things don't work our way, where we wake up in the morning, we look outside and it's bleary and it's rainy or it's 5 o'clock, or the kids are just coming home from school and it's dark already. That not everything has to be so good, not everything has to be indulged. And again, that's also a very important lesson for all of us and for our children. There's another perhaps good lesson we can learn from this time, which is how important the home is, and to cherish and appreciate our home and our family. As I said, when it's cold outside, we hunker down at home. When your kid comes home from school in April and May and June, even maybe say September, they can run outside, they can go on their bikes, they can play ball. When it's 27 degrees out and it's icy, you're much more likely to stay home. And again, maybe it's a time to appreciate family time. It's very interesting. There, a number of years ago, about 25 years ago, there was a large international study done on happiness. Again, I'm going back to that topic of happiness. And they want to understand what makes people happy. So they called it SWB, subjective well-being, because happiness didn't sound scientific enough. But what accounts for people's happiness? And they came up with the 3 Fs. 3 things that start with F. So if this was more interpersonal, or when I'm teaching it or if I'm speaking to teenagers, whatever, I let them try to guess what the 3 Fs are. Most people get the first 2, which is family and friends. The 3rd F people don't get too often, but it's faith. And faith not measured by how much you believe in God, but faith measured by membership in a house of worship. So then we take what do all 3 of these have in common? And what they have in common is connections. That if you have close family ties, if you have good friends, and you have a communal belonging of some sort, you're a happy person. That's all connections. And today, especially today, when we have a tendency to connect much more through devices instead of from person to person, it's perhaps a good time to be reminded how important it is for just family to be together, or even if friends come over, that you're not running all over the place or running from home to home, that you're together inside because perhaps the weather outside is more forbidding. So it's again an opportunity for us to reinforce that sense of family. And again, sometimes when the family has been uprooted in a way as divorce can, it's all the more important to come to appreciate those kind of family relationships. And while I'm at it, I just also want to reference another perhaps important lesson we can learn from this time. And I want to talk about midwinter vacations. I was very troubled to hear not so long ago about a certain community, I won't specify which one, but a rather opulent community where kids who do not go to Florida or to some exotic Caribbean island during midwinter vacation buy tanning sprays so they can come to school looking tanned as well. And that's so terribly misguided. The point of midwinter vacations or even a Hanukkah break, when you do something, and the doing something can be something local, can be, excuse me, can be an indoor amusement park, can be an ice skating rink or something like that. The point is not how exotic the setting is or how treacherous the roller coaster ride is. The point is family doing fun things together. It's again reinforced, goes back to the three F's, reinforcing that sense of family. And you can accomplish that just as well locally as you can traveling. And again, with some of the restrictions that one has if they're divorced, when the two families have to live in two different homes, or whatever it might be. In fact, I remember one student of mine from the Yeshiva University Smicha program where I teach, who is now assistant rabbi in a kind of relatively opulent community, told me how the rabbi goes out of his way during midwinter vacation to provide programs for the kids that are home, so they shouldn't feel they're somewhat at a disadvantage. But again, keep in mind what's as we say in more Talmudic language, what's the ikr and what's the tuffle, what's important and what's not important. Important for these kind of vacations and even the excursions that you take is so the child has memories of having fun and a good time with his family, not how warm the particular climate is. Another interesting thing I think, again, we can think about during this time of year are the very long Friday nights. And do we accept invitations or not accept invitations? And you find that in the winter months, the Friday night meal sort of lends itself more to having guests. It's when you're eating at 5:30, there's a lot of time. Shabbos is always, people are very busy, and so it's a time when you have to deal with the question is, again, as a single mother, a single parent, how many do you accept invitations? Do you not accept invitations? Is there anything wrong with just having a meal with your kids, even if there isn't, let's say, an adult male to make kiddush or something like that? And probably the ideal is some mixture. That yes, occasionally accept invitations, but from time to time have meals with your family. And let me mention one more thing also, which I don't think is being appreciated enough, is that you can be a host too. Just because you're a single parent doesn't mean you can't invite people over and you can host them. So, it's a time to rethink that whole process of invitations versus just being with family, with hosting and reciprocating yourself, even if you're divorced at this time. It's also a time where schoolwork and academics become very important. I remember one school principal told me that as far as she is concerned, school is from the end of Sukkot to the beginning of Pesach, because until Sukkot, everybody's just sort of getting used to school. After Pesach, everybody's already exiting off the days where the summer's going to come. But this is the intensive period where school, as I mentioned earlier, the novelty of school has worn off. And there's the issue of academic achievement. And again, we have to sometimes think at this point how, that we don't make achievement more important than the child. That, yes, we want to teach our children that it's important to learn, it's important to educate, it's important to meet your responsibilities in terms of assignments and studying for tests, but it shouldn't become at the expense of the child's well-being. Some kids are more ideally suited for school. That doesn't mean they're going to be more successful in life. Some are less ideally suited. So again, it's a period of time where we can think about those kind of priorities and at what cost are we sometimes pressuring our children to achieve or to be academically successful. And the other thing that's an important consideration, and I think doubly important for kids in the yeshiva system, is outlets. Again, in the spring and summer months. You can send them outside to ride their bikes, to run around, to play ball. It's a little harder in the winter. And again, the weather doesn't naturally lend itself to the absence of light doesn't lend itself. And sometimes during the winter months, it's important that kids, especially with the very long day and the pressured day that our children have, to have opportunities to do something physical, do exercise. Sometimes you can do it together as a family. That just have a period. Probably not a bad idea when they first come home from school. They're usually pretty stressed. If there's some running in place, some squats, some jumping jacks, just something physical, or it could be art, it could be music. But our kids need, especially teenagers, need outlets, and this is a time of year where you have to be a little bit more creative in providing them with that. And by the way, also keep in mind that the research on people who have nurtured great talent, very often it was a parent who discerned the child's skill in this area, and they nurtured it and developed it. So if your kid is naturally musical, to get them musical lessons as soon as possible. If your kid is naturally athletic, give them opportunities for athletic pursuits. But every child has their strengths, and to nurture them. I'd like to conclude with one more thought, and from that we can then maybe take some comments, questions. By the way, it doesn't have to be just questions. It could be if somebody has something that I didn't think about, or think that something that I said is ill-conceived, please share it with us. But I'm going to tell you that as little as you are at fault for the weather and amount of daylight that exists during this time of year, you're also no more responsible for the divorce, or the fact that your children are being raised in a single parent home, or a home where there's this shared co-parenting. We all have 20/20 hindsight. We're all Monday morning quarterbacks, and we can all look back and say, maybe I should have known, and maybe I should have pursued this. Maybe I should have looked at it this way and not that way. But divorces happen to very healthy, wholesome people. And by the way, there's some people who are really, I wouldn't let them watch my pet parakeet, and they're married. It's not a sign of mental illness. It's not a sign of some poor judgment. In fact, I will tell you, from having spent close to 50 years talking to people about every aspect of their lives, that there are people in very fulfilling, happy marriages who, when they think back to when they were dating, they had no way of predicting that it would be this good. So if they had no way of predicting to know how it would be that good, we couldn't know either. Looking back, for those who have been through a divorce, and I've been through a divorce myself, we couldn't have looked back and said and known how ill-conceived it was at the time. So so I'm going to sort of connect it with our lack of control over the weather, and how much the sun is out. This is something that happens, and it was for some reason meant to happen, but not something that one should take personal blame or responsibility for. Okay, at this point, I'm going to stop, and I don't know if anything have come into the chat, or if anybody wants to put me in cherem, or have me reported to the American Psychological Association. But let me hear if any questions came in, or comments.
There's definitely a couple of questions, and some are more coming in, so I'm sure more will come in as we talk. I think one of the questions over here that I'm interested to hear what you'd say as well, Doctor, is this is kind of like the long stretch of school as well. And one person writes that their son is struggling in school, and it's difficult navigating. Sometimes they're by me, sometimes they're by my husband, and my son is falling behind in terms of the work, and it's hard to help him, where I'm trying to be on top of the work and try to keep him successful in school, but he doesn't get the same by his father's house. Any tips on how to navigate this as it's struggling in school?
So let me start with the first half, which is that the child is struggling in school. If you stop and think for a second, we have only one setting where a child can, I'm not going to say one, but we have one predominant setting where a child can feel good about himself or not feel good about himself, and that's school. And schools all around the world are more similar than dissimilar. Wherever you go, you can go to the Soviet Union, you can go to Africa, you can go anywhere, and it's kids sitting behind a desk listening to an adult talking about something that they're not particularly interested in. Now, some children are just inherently better suited for that than others. That doesn't mean they'll necessarily be better, more successful in life. But if you think of the range of activities that we can engage in as adults and the limited settings that children have in terms of how feeling good about themselves, it really is it is a challenge. So again, sometimes for some children, the challenge is just to get them out of school with their self-esteem intact, and so that they can go out and take on the world. And in fact, in some respects, for example, there's research that shows that kids with ADHD, kids or ultimately adults with ADHD, are more creative and imaginative than those who do not have ADHD. But as you know, ADHD doesn't work well in a school setting. So it's a challenge. That's a challenge for parents who are married, for challenge for parents who are divorced. Now, the other thing that was brought up is what happens if there are two very discrepant approaches to the work, or sometimes what happens. And this is happening less as we have more shared physical custody, which is becoming more and more the norm, where it's like 1 week, 1 week. But first of all, it doesn't always work. It only works if the parents are in basically the same community. And some have some of the more traditional, traditional physical custody arrangements where the child's predominantly usually with the mother and with short intervals with the father. And sometimes we'll use that as an example. That's most of the cases. The father feels so shortchanged because he's not with his child so much that he feels that he has to make that day all recreation, all fun. So he doesn't want to bother the child with homework, and he doesn't want to pressure the child for studying. And he wants just to be amusement parks and playing all day, which is not healthy, and it's not a normal father-child relationship. I have actually sat down with fathers and said, let's calculate how much time you spent with your child when you were married. And you'll soon see that they're spending more time with their child during visitations than they would when they were married. In fact, I often say jokingly that this concept of visitation should be applied to married couples as well. There should be a Sunday where you're required to spend an entire day with your child. It's a wonderful idea. But it is a problem then when the non-custodial parent feels they have to be purely a recreational parent. I have not had much success in changing that, but I think this newer arrangement does allow for that. And then again, it's possible that one parent is better suited for either managing the child who resists homework, or maybe better suited because they're able to do the homework with the child better. So it's ideal if you can co-parent, if you can work, and if both parents do impart that same pressure. But if they don't, you can't. It's not worth it to make it into a fight, because that only usually makes things worse. If you have that kind of relationship where you can make a suggestion and the person hears you, that's helpful. But if it's going to devolve into an argument, it's not worth it. Children are capable, and this is perhaps the solution. Children are capable of compartmentalizing. We are, as adults, capable of compartmentalizing. I'll give a simple example that probably many of us can relate to. You're at a job and you have to focus on your job, but that night, something very big is going to happen, or you're looking forward to something, or whatever it might be. You're planning a child's bat mitzvah, bar mitzvah, and then it's really what's on your mind, but you have to put it aside because you have to do whatever your job is during your day. So we compartmentalize. So I'm at work, I'm focusing on that, and when I'm finished with work, I can focus on the other thing. Children can compartmentalize even from discrepant homes. They can understand that in this home, this is the norm, and in this home, this is the norm. And ultimately, sometimes the way you can look at it when there are these discrepant types of parenting practices, that you can do it in such a fashion and a way that ultimately the child will come to appreciate the way you're doing it better than perhaps the other parent. But it's sometimes a better choice to just allow for that. And really, when the child says, well, daddy doesn't make me do homework, or, something like that, so what would you do in daddy's house? When you're in daddy's house, you have to listen to daddy. When you're in mommy's house, you have to listen to mommy, and not get into trying to change what's going on in the other home. I hope that answers the question. If not, please let me know. Okay.
Thank you. And this is such a special opportunity, really, for everyone to be able to ask. There's another question that came in about I'm a single mother that is trying to really navigate and juggle so many things, including a job. And then when my children come home, I don't know exactly, like I feel like I'm just kind of done at this point. and I feel like I also want to be present, and I feel guilty, but I don't feel like I have enough in the tank to give them. Tips in terms of what I could either do with them or how to take care of myself so that I'm more present for them.
Right, right. So this is a common issue. I mean, there's a job that taxes two parents that you're doing by yourself, and it is really Herculean and heroic, and yeah, and the children of course don't appreciate it. The children are too narcissistic. They'll appreciate it, when they're raising children, but at this point, you're not going to get a whole lot of accolades from them, and just as you said, having in the tank or having the bandwidth after a whole day of work to deal with very needy and children who've been, what happens very often when they come home, they've been holding everything in school because they have to behave and they have to perform. And now they just want to, explode, and you have to sort of manage that. And it is hugely difficult. And the only thing I can say is that don't, as much as you can, and do indulge yourself. If you have, let's say, the family support, if there are grandparents, or if during those times that the children are with the other parent, if you can do something that's self-indulgent, that's relaxing, that replenishes you, it's necessary. Even for couples who are together, it's certainly necessary for a parent who's raising a child on their own. And again, there's also some huge financial pressures because, again, the two homes now have to, the income that would support typically one home has to support two homes. So it is, there's no doubt about it. And by the way, that's the wonderful thing about an organization like Sister to Sister and Al Kanfei Nisharm, that you have other people who understand that, and not just understand it cognitively, but sort of understand it in their kishkas. And sometimes if you call one of your friends or mentors or something, and you just share how drained you are, and the other person who's been through it or is going through it can relate in an empathic way, you'll be surprised how energizing that can be.
Wow. By the way, just this is not going till 10. I think that's going to be too much for everyone. We just
Oh,
that time. So we're going to end at 9:30. But we do have a couple more questions I want to ask you.
sure.
Um, this question comes in of how do I explain to the school faculty the struggles of my child and that
Oh,
a lot of it is coming from a divorced household, and I'm struggling to take on both parental roles to this child.
okay. So I'm going to tell you that I think the problem is really the opposite one. What I hear sometimes from parents, from single parents, especially in divorce situations, is that people are so quick to attribute the problems or the challenges that the child's going through to divorce that they overlook problems that kids have, whether the parents are divorced or not divorced. And I've heard from sometimes single parents that they're afraid to go to school to concern when there's concerns about, let's say, troubles with certain subjects, maybe bullying or maybe social difficulties or attentional problems, because they're afraid right away it's going to be attributed to the divorce. So they'd rather, keep it to themselves. But it is, listen, any hardship is an element of loneliness, and some people will get it. And there will be teachers and administrators and even mental health professionals who will get it. Some will not. And you have to know your customers. And if, it is that, again, I'm going to say, and it's going to be a commercial, why something like the efforts that we're partnering with Sister Sis and Al Kanfei Nisharm is important, because you'll be around people who do get it. But you may have to be selective, because some people won't, and some people will be very quick to blame the problems on the divorce. And the reality is that most kids from divorce homes do function very well. So it's a stereotype and a prejudice that's really not warranted.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, there's two questions. I'm going to combine them into one. But basically about dealing with an ex that you're not just on the same page, but the ex is doing things that are really, really cruel, that are, borderline abusive, sabotaging certain types of things intentionally just to kind of cause distress. And how to balance, right? What am I sharing with my kids? Because then I essentially become the bad person here by not sharing. But I also don't want to be in that position where I'm kind of bad mouthing back.
Yeah, you've hit it on the nail, on the poison. of divorce, and it's very hard to prove these things. And if you start trying to litigate it or trying to arrange, I mean, it has to be pretty obvious and horrific to succeed in getting what's usually a solution, which would be supervised visitation, and even some of that supervision is very lacking. I remember one case where there was a parent where there was accusations of improprieties, and they went with the supervised visitation at an amusement park, and they went on a Ferris. The child and the parent went on the Ferris wheel, and the supervisor was on the bottom watching from the Ferris. I remember I got a call from the mother, hysterical, like, what kind of supervision is that? So it's very hard to prove, and that is very challenging. And what you really need to do is to try to create some very strict boundaries between what's the one home and the other home. And also, by the way, in situations like that, you probably have to have some sort of, I'm going to call it a ceremony, but some sort of, if you will, a ritual when transitioning from one home to the other, because they come from that other home bursting over with sometimes a lot of venom and sometimes a lot of tension, and they so readily bring it into your home that it's sometimes good to have something you do in between. Like when you come home from that other home, we go into a room and we do some yoga together, or we go into we have a try to have a special treat. We have cupcakes, donuts, whatever. I mean, sometimes that makes them more hyper, but maybe just some hot chocolate. And we sit together in a darker room, and we will sing a little bit. Just let them diffuse from the pressure of that other home. But that is, I pains me to say, but that's the most challenging part of when you are sharing the parenting, and the other parent does have some destructive tendencies, and sometimes that's the reason why there was a divorce. The best of all solutions in situations like this are usually the ones where that offending parent, he does one or two, does one or two things. They shoot themselves in the foot, does something so destructive or harmful that you can do something to prevent the parenting, or they get sick and tired. Very often these may be narcissistic people who after a while, having bratty kids around them is not fun, and they kind of phase out of the parenting role. But actively intervene in situations like that and prevent it from happening is very difficult. Sometimes does more harm than good. But it's a case by case consideration.
Yeah. We have at least two more that I really want to get to here. So, one of the questions comes in that this time of year there's a lot of Abu Subanim programs, and my son does have someone who takes him, but he's really grieving the fact that his father is not available to take him, as he's out of state, and he's really, really suffering as a result, and he's really, really sad about this. What do I tell him?
So if again, hopefully, if it's applicable, you assure him that his father loves him, and you can assure him also that that's not a threat to you, that the care, that having, your affection for your father is something you want him to have, is not a disruption to you. And I mean, if the parent is out of state and really well-meaning and really wants to have the contact with today's technology, you can have plenty contact, and you can have the Zooms and FaceTimes. It's much easier than it was many years ago. But there is it is but again, as long as you make it clear. Now that might be hard if you feel the parent's destructive to the child, but let's assume you don't feel that way. It's give child permission to love their father and to miss their father and be sympathetic. It's not going to, if anything, it'll endear him to you. It won't distance him from you.
Beautiful. Okay. There are a lot of, meaning with the Yom Tovim not around this time. Some people who are thinking about dating for a second time, are
Hi.
thinking
Yeah.
about how to navigate that, while still balancing all the other things. And now I'm dating, and I'm seeing in the question a little bit of
Okay.
frustration. It seems
Okay.
like,
So that should be an hour webinar in its own right. I'll give you the key points. Point number one: heal from the first marriage before you try to enter a second marriage. Um, Don't try to marry someone who is not the first spouse, because that's not always a good reason. Don't date out of desperation. If you're desperate, you don't see things clearly. Date at a time when you would like, when it would be really enhance your life, but you're not desperate to have someone, because I said desperation beclouds our judgment. Dating the second time around is a very different type of dating. It isn't that same kind of googly-eyed excitement and stupidity that usually comes with the first dating. It's much more calculated thinking, and has to be thought out. And blending families is wonderful, healing, but takes a lot of work. It doesn't happen just naturally. It's something you have to think about and plan ahead of time. As well. But I would also encourage, if it's at all possible, and that's why I think it's important to limit the self-blame, not to necessarily say that you just don't think you're marriage material because one marriage didn't work. I remember Rav David Cohen once pointed out to me, as only Rav David Cohen can, that the very first Rav Yaakov Emden in Masechta Soda, only he would remember on the just off the top of his head, the first Yaakov Emden in Masechta Sota, but the very first Yaakov Emden in Masechta Sota says that Zivik Rishon and Zivik Sheni doesn't necessarily mean in chronological order, and your second Zivik and your Zivik Rishon, and so it is, trust yourself, and if for some reason you feel you were to at fault, let's say, there was something harmful in the manner in which you related that caused divorce, then take care of it. And as I said, to go back to our theme, there's spring after winter, and hopefully it'll be spring after winter for everybody who's participating in this webinar as well.
Well, Dr. Blumenthal, thank you so much for such a
My
special
pleasure.
presentation, and really there's such gems here, and also just looking at the comments to see how much it meant to everybody here.
Oh, great. I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, and we're very, very excited again at OL to be partnering with Sister to Sister and the terrific work that they do.
I'm happy to be part of it. Any way I can.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. And
Okay.
Amir Tashem, there is going to be a recording of this that's sent out after a couple of days, probably alongside a survey as well. And we would love to hear from you and love to see what more we could do to help support you. So wishing everyone.
Okay.
Right, Kai, is there anything that you want to share?
Thank you. No, that was excellent, Dr.
Okay,
Blumenthal. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Have a good night.